Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive on something I think we all struggle with sometimes. You know that feeling, right? That feeling of self-doubt that can creep in, especially when we're trying to manifest our desires and make those big goals happen. Yeah, we're diving deep into an article today by Gilby Vittman all about it, and they offer some seriously practical solutions, which I am here for.
So true. And it's interesting, we hear all this stuff about positive thinking and all of that, but like actually understanding how self-doubt impacts the entire manifestation process.
Yeah.
That's key to breaking through those barriers for good.
100%. And I think there's something really reassuring about knowing that everyone deals with this, right? Like, it's okay to admit that we're all human, and sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. Vittman really breaks down exactly how self-doubt throws a wrench in the works, which I thought was super insightful. So
But
that's what we're going to explore today.
yeah, let's totally unpack that because it's
Yeah.
like, it's almost like it's this subconscious thing that we do ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's about shedding light on those mechanisms so we can actually regain control.
Okay, so let's get into it. Vittman outlines four main ways that self-doubt kind of trips us up. Negative thought patterns, fear of failure, resistance to change, and then, of course, good old lack of trust.
And sometimes it's almost like those things can get intertwined too.
Mm.
Like, let's take that resistance to change idea. I feel like it's more than just like, oh, I'm just going to stick with my routine. It's comfy.
Yeah.
It comes from this deeper place of fear, right? Fear of the unknown, maybe a fear of judgment, sometimes even like a fear of success, which is crazy.
You're so right, because we don't even realize it's like our mind convinces us that staying put is safer, even if we're totally unhappy with where we're at. So fascinating how that works.
It is.
And it makes me think, too, about how much of this comes down to, like, how our brains are wired, negativity bias and all that fun stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our brains are naturally geared towards focusing on threats and what could go wrong.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, survival mechanism and all. But when it comes to manifesting our desires and actually going after what we want, that negativity bias, total roadblock.
It's true, though, because then those negative thought patterns, they become like self-fulfilling prophecies almost.
Exactly.
We ruminate on what we don't want. And then guess what? We end up attracting exactly
It's
that.
like that saying where attention goes, energy flows.
Ugh, tell me about it. I can't even tell you how many times I've manifested something I didn't want just because I was giving it so much energy.
Yeah, it's like we're feeding those doubts and fears, giving them power to actually shape our reality.
Okay, so it sounds like, at least to me, we're not just victims of our own brains here, right? Wait, there's hope for us.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much hope. And that's what's so amazing about all of this. Once we actually see how it all works, how these things are connected, that's when we can start to rewire those patterns, shift our focus, and really take control of our destiny.
Love that. Okay, but before we get to the how-to part, like how do we actually combat these patterns that feel so ingrained? I think it'd be helpful to really dig into one of these self-doubt traps. Let's take negative thought patterns. Like, I feel like it sounds simple enough on the surface, but what's really going on in our minds when those doubts start to spiral?
Okay, so picture this. You're about to go for a job interview for your dream job. Like, this could be a total game changer for you. But instead of visualizing yourself totally killing the interview and getting the job, your mind starts replaying all these past experiences where you felt like you messed up. Or you start, like, totally catastrophizing about everything that could go wrong.
Ugh, been there. It's like my inner critic decides to throw a party right before any big event, and everyone's invited. All the self-doubt, the insecurities, the whole gang. So how do we hit the pause button on that mental mayhem?
That's where the whole recognize and acknowledge strategy comes in, which sounds a lot simpler than it is, but it's actually way more powerful than it might seem.
So we're hitting the pause button on all that mental noise. Easier said than done, though, right?
Oh, tell me about it. It definitely takes practice, but that's where this recognize and acknowledge thing comes in. Okay, so imagine this. You're trying to get somewhere you've never been before, right? But you're just driving around aimlessly, hoping for the best. No map, no GPS, just vibes. That's kind of what it's like when we try to ignore those negative thoughts,
Yep.
or just suppress them and hope they go away. We're not actually acknowledging where we're starting from.
I love that analogy because it's so true. If you don't even know you're lost, how can you find your way?
Exactly. It's like you recognize and acknowledge. It's like finally pulling over, admitting you're lost, and then busting out the map and being like, okay, where do we go from here?
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Like in real life, do we just like have a conversation with our self-doubt? Like, hey there, self-doubt, thanks for joining us today.
Sometimes it can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Seriously, just noticing the thought and naming it. Like,
Mhm.
okay, this is fear talking right now.
Yeah.
That can actually take away some of its power, which is wild.
Yeah.
But Vipman also talks about journaling, which I'm a huge fan of.
Oh, yeah. Journaling is the best.
So it's like, write down those negative thoughts as they come up.
I feel like it's almost like you're getting them out of your head and onto paper where you can actually see them for what they are.
Exactly. And once they're out in the open, then we can start to challenge them, which conveniently Vipman talks about as the next step.
Okay, yes, let's dig into that. Because I have to admit, the whole challenging your negative thoughts thing, it can feel a little bit like, trying to argue with a brick wall sometimes.
I hear you. It can definitely feel that way. But it's not really about arguing with them. It's more about questioning them. Remember those questions that Vipman suggests, like, what evidence do I actually have to support this thought?
Oh, that's a good one. Because a lot of times when we actually stop and examine those thoughts, there's really not much there.
Right.
It's mostly just our fears and insecurities, dressed up in these fancy little fact costumes.
Totally. It's like they're trying to trick us. And another question I love that Vipman brings up is this thought actually helping me or is it hurting me?
Ooh, that's a good one. Because it really shifts the focus, right? It's not about whether the thought is true or not. It's about whether it's actually serving us. And let's be real, most of the time, those negative thought spirals, not exactly helpful.
No, not at all. They just keep us stuck in this cycle of fear and inaction.
So it's like by asking ourselves if the thought is helpful or hurtful, that's how we can start making more conscious choices about where we direct our energy.
Exactly. It's about taking back our power.
Yes. Love that. Like we're finally taking control of the steering wheel instead of letting our inner critic drive us around in circles.
It's about time, right?
I'm so ready to ditch that back seat driver.
Right. Like, I got this.
Exactly. It really feels like that's the core of what we're talking about here. It's
Yeah.
not just about like forcing ourselves to think positive thoughts all the time. It's about actually making that choice.
Yeah.
Choosing where we're going to put our energy and focus.
Totally. It's about reclaiming our power.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Those self-doubt gremlins, they thrive in the shadows. They don't want us to see them for what they are.
Oh, they're so sneaky.
They are. But when we actually shine a light on them, question their whole deal, that's when they start to lose their grip on us.
And that's when things can get really exciting, don't you think?
Oh, 100%.
Because when we're not constantly battling those thought patterns in our heads, it frees up so much space and energy to actually go after what we want.
It's like we've cleared the path,
Yeah.
Removed all the roadblocks. Now we can finally start moving toward our desires with so much more intention and purpose. And that, I think, is where the real magic happens.
Yes, like we're finally in the driver's seat, map in hand, ready to hit the gas. So as we're kind of like wrapping up this deep dive here, I wanted to touch on something you said earlier. This idea that it's about so much more than just manifesting stuff.
It's bigger than that. It's about building this like unshakable foundation of self-trust.
Yeah.
Because when we trust ourselves, when we believe in our ability to handle whatever comes our way, that's true power.
So good. And that shift in self-belief,
It changes everything.
it really does.
It impacts every single area of life.
It's not just about manifesting, a new job or a bigger apartment. It's about showing up as the most confident, amazing version of ourselves in every situation.
Exactly. Recognizing how worthy we are, how capable we are, and that knowing we are deserving of all the good stuff, that is everything.
It's such a game changer. Like Vipman says at the end of the article, the only limits are the ones we set for ourselves.
So true. So I'm curious, what limits are you ready to break free from?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I think it's one that we could all benefit from asking ourselves a little more often. What dreams, what goals, what adventures have we been putting off? All because that inner critic told us we weren't good enough, smart enough, ready enough. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to finally silence that voice and start living a life that's truly aligned with our desires.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. And until next time, remember, you are capable of creating a reality that is even more amazing than you can imagine.
Absolutely. Go make it happen.